Okay, the first video I want to do is on equivalent fractions because that kind of introduces some of the topics I want to discuss later. So if we start with an easy fraction like 1/2, students are pretty familiar with 1/2. They've seen it before. They can visualize the concept of 1/2. But there are other ways to write a fraction. Equivalent fractions have different numerators and denominators, but they represent the same amount. So one important thing to note is you have to know what the whole is. So if we're talking about a whole apple or a whole pizza or a whole piece of paper, that really matters when you're determining equivalent fractions because 1/2 of a pizza is not, of course, going to be equivalent to 1/2 of an apple. So I showed my students that, with the fraction tiles that you can make shapes that are the same size, but this is 2/4 and this is 1/2, but they equal the same amount. And I let them explore with different things. So like we can go to 12ths. Can we make a shape that's equivalent to 1/2 with 12ths? And then they kind of usually start to see a pattern. Here, look, okay, it's 6/12ths. 6/12ths is also equivalent to 1/2, which is also equivalent to 2/4. So that's the physical representation. The next thing we talk about is if you add a 0 to the top or the bottom, the fraction actually stays the same. As long as you add a 0 to the numerator and the denominator, that's one way to write an equivalent fraction. And as long as you write the same number of zeros on the top and the bottom, 2,000 over 4,000 is still equal to 2/4, which is still equal to 1/2. So that's a really easy way to list bunches and bunches of equivalent fractions. Another way is by making them smaller. So if we started out with a big fraction, like 50 out of 100, you can make it smaller. We talked about how as long as you do the same thing to the top and the bottom, to the numerator and the denominator, you're not actually changing a fraction, what the amount equals, you're just changing the numbers. Because 2 over 2 is equal to 1, so you're really dividing by 1. But if we divide 50 by 2, we get 25. 100 divided by 2 is 50. So 25/50ths is equivalent to 50/100ths.